Today, we're diving into the dramatic fall of King Louis XVI of France, the last king of an old world, a man who would lose not only his crown, but also his head. I mean, that's the real question, isn't it? How does that even happen? It's an incredible story of revolution, of betrayal, and the complete collapse of a way of life. And to really get it, you have to understand the man who was right at the center of the storm. All right, so let's start here. This idea of him being a king by accident is just fascinating because, Louis XVI was never supposed to be on the throne. He grew up in the unbelievable splendor of Versailles, but he was shy, quiet, deeply insecure, not exactly the stuff of an absolute monarch. But as we're about to see, fate had very different plans for him. And this is where you really see the problem, this huge mismatch. France in the late 18th century was a real powder keg. It was buried in debt, partly from helping fund the American Revolution, and society was just fundamentally broken. The country desperately needed a strong, bold leader, but what it got was Louis. A good man, maybe, but a man who was full of doubt and hesitation right when decisive action was the only thing that could have saved him. This really shows you who he was as a person. He wasn't a cruel guy. He was actually pretty smart. He loved geography, he was good with languages, and he had this real passion for mechanics. He famously loved making intricate locks by hand. But think about it. Those are the skills and hobbies of a private gentleman, right? Not the skills you need to be a king staring down a revolution. And that's the absolute heart of it. His personality, his indecisiveness, it wasn't just some personal quirk. In this moment, it was a massive political liability. And that hesitation, well, it would turn out to be fatal. Okay, so now things really start to heat up. The revolution is about to ignite, and this is where all of Louis's personal flaws are going to crash head-on into these massive, unstoppable historical forces. I mean, just look at how quickly everything unraveled in 1789. Louis calls this ancient assembly, the Estates General, to try and fix the country's money problems. But it completely backfires. The commoners break away, they form their own national assembly, and then they make this totally shocking declaration. The right to rule belongs to the nation, not to the king. In a matter of months, the foundation of 1,000 years of monarchy just crumbles. And what was Louis's reaction to all this? Well, you guessed it. He hesitated. He swung back and forth between trying to crack down and trying to compromise. He just ended up looking weak and untrustworthy to everyone. By failing to grab hold of the situation, he lost it. It was as simple as that. And this is what leads to the one single act that completely shattered any trust left between the king and his people. This was the real point of no return. Feeling more and more like a prisoner in his own Parisian palace, with his power slipping away, Louis decided to do something desperate. Yep, in June of 1791, the entire royal family, in disguise, made a run for it. The plan was to escape France, get help from foreign armies, and then come back to crush the revolution and take back his throne. But it was a total disaster. He was recognized near the border, arrested in a small town called Varennes, and dragged back to Paris in absolute humiliation. For the French people, this was it, the ultimate betrayal. Their king had tried to abandon them and wage war against them. And that right there, that was the moment everything changed. After the flight to Varennes, the illusion was completely shattered. From that point on, in the eyes of his people, he wasn't a king anymore. He was a prisoner. So, with the king's betrayal now out in the open, the revolution gets even more radical. It was no longer about reform. Now it was time to put the man himself on trial. And the charge? Well, it couldn't be more serious. Treason. They had found evidence that he'd been secretly communicating with France's enemies, basically plotting against his own country from inside his own palace. So here's how it all went down. By 1792, the monarchy is officially gone, abolished. Louis stripped of all his titles, and from now on, he's just called Citizen Louis Capet. And he wasn't tried in a normal court. Nope, he was tried by the National Convention, the revolutionary government itself. His former subjects were now his judges. The debate was just ferocious. But it all boiled down to one single, terrifying question. And for the revolutionaries, this was about so much more than just one man's life. This was about killing the very idea of monarchy forever. The vote was razor thin, agonizingly close. But in the end, the verdict was final. Citizen Louis Capet was sentenced to die.
And that brings us to the end. The final, grim morning of January 21st, 1793. The day France did the unthinkable and executed its own king.
His last day unfolded with this cold, mechanical precision. He woke early and he prayed. Then came the long, slow carriage ride through the silent streets of Paris. He arrived to face an enormous crowd waiting for him. He tried to give one last speech, and then the blade. Standing up there on the scaffold, he tried to speak. He wanted to declare his innocence and forgive the people who had condemned him. But the commander of the guard ordered a drum roll, and his voice was just swallowed up, silenced by the very revolution he couldn't control. The blade fell, and just like that, 1,000 years of French monarchy died with him. He was only 38 years old. So when you look back, what's the takeaway? History doesn't really paint him as a monster. It paints him as a decent man who was a weak king, and he found himself on the throne at the exact moment in history that demanded incredible strength, a strength he just didn't have. And that leaves us with this huge question, doesn't it? Was Louis just a victim of history, swept away by a tide that was too powerful for anyone to stop? Or was he the author of his own downfall? Did his own flaws, his own hesitation, and his ultimate betrayal seal his fate?